Good morning, my people. We're doing chapter 19 today. This morning, Christmas Eve's morning. So, this is Perrin, chapter 19, the UFO mystery. And this case is called Death Caused by Humanoids. Okay, so this case goes back to 1967. Okay, so this case goes back to a case in Brazil, that happened to one of the employees of this little farm in Santa Maria in the state of Goiás. This employee hit with a pistol, with a Winchester 44. He shot at an airplane, at the beings that were leaving the sort of airplane device, and he got a jet of light that weakened him. A little bit after this sighting, Mr. Olavo Fontes got sick, and because he didn't get better, they kind of forgot about this case. Um, okay, so after a little bit more research, they were able to find out that the person had been struck by a green beam of light and had died 59 days after the sighting. The friend who knew about this story told us that they kept secret because he was told by friends that this becoming this case public would bring some hassle, and it would provoke panic in between the population. But as there has passed more or less 1 year since this incident, he thought that it would be possible to tell the complete report of the facts, just like the people that took part on this sighting, on the condition that we don't reveal their real names. Okay, so they're talking that they made a very good exposition. This is the image, guys, of the farm, the humanoids, and the fact that he shot against these men. The lady ran away, and he was struck by green lightning, guys. Okay, so now the report goes as follows. Inácio de Souza was his real name. With 41 years old, he was married with Maria, a father of 5 kids. He was doing his work in his farm. He administrated this property where he lived and worked for 6 years. He never heard or talked about or seen any UFOs before. On the 13th of August, 67th, Inacio and his wife were coming back home um, to his farm in the state of Goiás. When they got close to their house, they noticed that there was a landing. They noticed that in front of their landing strip at their house, they noticed that there was a strange object in the form of a cuvette with an opening turning downwards. This object had about 35 minutes of diameter. Between the device and the house, there were three unknown men. He tells the facts. Me and Maria were arriving, and the three individuals were there. I thought they were people that came to visit, but I got scared by the weird airplane that they had. They looked like us, but they looked bald, but I still couldn't see if they had hair. They were playing, and so they were playing with 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 the kids, but in silence. They pointed at him and they started to run in their direction. Then I screamed to my wife to run home. As I was carrying a rifle, I shot the one that was closest to me. At that moment, it left from the airplane like it was a rechargeable pill, a green light that stroked me on my chest on the left side. I fell on the ground. My wife ran towards me and grabbed the gun, but the man had already entered the airplane, which it raised at very quick velocity in a vertical way, making a similar noise to the noise as the bees. So a zummy noise, a bzzz. The reporter got to the farm 3 days later. He didn't know anything. When he left his private jet airplane, the woman of Inacio was waiting for him and told him that he was sick. Because he was a strong man and never had anything, I went to his room and seen him lying down. I told him, "What's going on, my boy?" Then he answered, um, "Employer, I killed a man." I was amazed, I was shocked, and I asked him, "But how could you do such thing?" He said then, he told him what had happened, explaining that he had shot on him because they thought they were going to kidnap his family and he was afraid. The reporter understood by the story of Ignacio that he was still thinking of the man. He was still thinking that the men were from Sao Paulo, and that not to scare him more, he didn't tell him about the flying disc. After examining the place, he checked to see if there was any blood on the floor uh, from the man that had been shot, but he didn't find anything. He could later on obtain more details. Ignacio told him that He shot exactly in the head of the robber, and he added that he never missed a shot at at 60 meters of distance because he was an excellent shot. He also added that after the the sighting, Ignatius started to have a problem of conscience because he was sure that he had killed the man, even though he didn't find anything to prove it. On what gives respect to the men, the wife is of opinion that they were dressed with a sort of a glued suit to their body in a light yellow color. Ignacio says they were naked, maybe because the suits were very glued and a sort of a kind of a skin color. Okay, so when he went to the doctor, Ignacio, he says that on the first and second day he had nausea, tingling, and um, swelling all over his body. And during those days, his hands shook. I decided to take him to Goiânia to do a full exam, and I recommended him not to tell what happened. The doctor, when he arrived, without knowing what he had, told him that he had a burn with about 15 centimeters of diameter on his left side of his trunk, almost next to his shoulder. To treat his wound, he gave him a remedy that is called unguento picrato de butazine. About the other symptoms, he diagnosed that they had an origin, a vegetable cause. He thought that Ignacio had eaten some sort of bad weeds, so I decided to tell the doctor what had happened. Surprised, the doctor asked, "But did anyone else see those men?" Has anyone else seen those men? He said, "My wife." And then the doctor called me on the side and asked me if I had ever talked to Inashi about the UFOs, and I told him no. He asked him if Inacio if he had seen those sort of airplanes or if anyone had talked to him. He said, "No, sir, I never seen nothing like that, nor I even heard of." The doctor then prescribed to go to the hospital and do a complete examination of his feces, urine, and blood. After he was 4 days in observation, he was sent home. Surprised for not having him more time for treatment, I went to the doctor, and the doctor told me that he then told me that the case of Ignacio was fatal, and the exams had shown him that he had leukemia, blood cancer, and that he only had on the maximum 60 days to live. He also told me, and sir, he told me that I would forget everything that happened. It was arranged that he didn't see anything. Um, he has a name to preserve, and above that, everything else would just cause a panic. About me, I never heard anything or I don't know anything, but I have a reputation, and for me, it's a case of leukemia. So the doctor was a bit. So the death of Ignacio. From what his wife told, his health started to worsen. He had all of his body yellow white dot dots from the size of a nail. He had excruciating pain. He was getting thinner, and at the time of his death, he was skin and bones. He recommended the wife that she would burn the bed, the the bedding, and all his clothes after his death. He died on 11th of October 1967. Just like he asked, everything was burned. Ignacio had symptoms of radioactive origin leukemia, from which he died 60 days, predicted by the doctor. After the moment that he received the luminous beam, his health was struck and started to have characteristic symptoms of exposure to radiations of fatal radiations of ionium. Either they had origin on the rays or fluoroscopic in or cyclotronic or in isotopes, radioactive isotopes, or any source of ionizing radiations, alpha rays, beta, gamma rays, flux of neutrons, cosmic rays, and others. They produce similar effects over the cells and the organs. There are no specific consequences to a determined type of radiation, though there are still some differences. Above all, on the necessary dose to make appear a determined result. Keeping the same conditions, uh, just like the case of the body covered in spots, the time exposition, etc. The more heavy particles, just like the alpha rays, have more possibility of destructing the elements of the living tissues than the more light particles. The fact that the interior of the organ is struck by the maximum permitted dose is zero point 0.3 Roentgen per week. This is the Radiologic Commission. It leads to the destruction of about 300 molecules in every cell of our organism. We know we have about 50 50,000 million cells. Just to comparison, the elephant has 6,500,000,000 cells. So they say that if you receive a very big dose of Roentgens, the death can happen immediately or in a few days or even a few months or years. It also depends on the surface of the area struck and the duration of the radioactive beam, etc. There are still no clinical symptoms permanent that can be used to fight against these um, destructive products of radiations of ionium, and unless these symptoms manifest effectively. The part of the body from which you can have physical results of a dose of irritation is the skin, in which you can have a sort of a burn mark. On the case of Ignacio, he had nittedly burn mark on the area that he was struck by the beam. After the description of the British Medical Research Council, the nausea is a symptom of a classical acute radiation that usually disappears in 2 or 3 days. But just like the case of Inacio, the ones that suffer to radiations, we can observe hemorrhagics in the skin hemorrhaging, see, followed by the apparition of subcutaneous subcutaneous vesicles that produce ulcers, very painful. Other symptoms can be that also Ignacio felt was a feeling of tingling and swelling on the areas that was struck, accompanied by tremors and muscular dysthymia. Leucemia of radioactive origin can result in small doses of radiation, repetitive during months or years, or just for a unique dosage and a simple exposition to a very strong dose. Leukemia is very frequent in people that were exposed to radiations of aonium for long periods of time. All the symptoms by Ignacio were from leukemia caused by a strong dose of radiation. Okay, we don't have anything else to add to the commentaries of this case of Professor Felipe about this disease. Uh, Judging about the effects, the beam of light that struck Ignacio on his chest seemed to be made of ionizing particles, similar to the ones produced by our accelerator, particle accelerator, just like CERN, guys. When the beam lights of these devices are very intense, they may have very low luminosity due to the ionization that they suffer when they cross the air. In this case, by the contrary, the beam light emitted by the disk was very vivid, and even though unfortunately we don't know the time of the incident, we think that it happened during the late daylight or even when at dusk. We see that Ignacio and his wife were coming back from Crixas. In all cases, we have the sensation that they were coming, they saw the strange object directly, and the beams got out of there, of the inside. They didn't describe them as being autoluminous, the beings. Inesio saw very well, and he has very good shooting. The testimonies described the color of the people, of those beings and their suits. It was still day, therefore these conditions of the light beam you couldn't you could limit to a bigger phosphorescence. The exposition of Ignacio to the ray was very brief, but enough to have mortal consequences, having been struck, even though through his clothes, which he has nothing surprising. It's some X-rays, some gamma rays, or some flux of neutrons. If that struck Ignacio could be inserted inside the phenomenon known by our science, we can deduce that the beam was very intense. Even the the beings didn't have any guns, or they didn't use them at the time. We can suppose that there was someone inside the device protecting them and watching over their security, unless it was them that had a, a command on their hands that sent the beam. But let's note that the device was very precise when it pointed to Ignacio, So it was like it was following him. So basically, Ignacio was already under their scope, guys. Okay, so here he compares it to we can imagine without even leaving our house, we can give a automatic shot through detection of infrared emitted by human beings. We will never know if Ignacio really shot that being, guys. These beings that he thought were from Sao Paulo had in truth intention to kidnap him and his family? He asks. Even this question remains without answer. Um, there may be a tragic mistake here. Can it be that these beings were playing and they ran on the direction to the ones that just arrived and they would be happy but with evil intent? There is a contrast evident on the gestures of them very happy of these beings and their running, which could be even a gesture of curiosity. The brutal Winchester 44 shot, maybe it was necessary to tell the men, don't shoot over the humanoids. The answer was spontaneous and terrible. Let's note that the intruders could also hurt the wife with the same ray and could not run away. Um, if they came to took over the human beings, just like Ignacio thought, evil intent or not, they know that they wouldn't be interested in taking. Certainly, they wouldn't be interested in taking the Earthlings, and that they knew that they were condemned to death in a little while. Because they use this ray as a gun, as a weapon, they should know, they may know their biological meaning. They wouldn't make the use of guns or rays. Um, for example, in Valençol, um, for the other uh, occupiers of these devices. So this Brazilian incident shows that not all objects strange are look-alike, and not all of them have the same nature and origin, nor they're piloted by beings of the same species or with the same level of technology. The incident at this farm shows that we are upon a phenomenon with a level of technology which has nothing to do with ours, and their behavior and projection should not be very similar to us. Merry Christmas, my people. Hope you enjoyed. Blessed Christmas and great entrances on the new year. Please help someone. Love you very much.